Okay, well, I want to welcome our audience to the discussion we're going to have today. My name is Linda Smith, and I am the Director of the Early Childhood Initiative at the Bipartisan Policy Center. And here with me is Suzanne Morris, who is a fellow with the Policy Center. And what we're going to do today is talk to you a little bit about an issue that we think is important to our country's child care situation and answers to some of the challenges that we have. And that is specifically the issue of the faith community and their role in providing high quality childcare for this country. A few years ago, the Bipartisan Policy Center brought together a diverse group of stakeholders, and they made recommendations for how we should move forward to solve some of the nation's problems. One of their biggest recommendations was to engage the faith community. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing just that. So what we are releasing today is a report entitled Examining the Role of Faith-Based Childcare in our nation's system. And we encourage you all to go out and take a look at that and read it. So what we're going to do first is go through some slides here that'll tell you just what we did, a quick overview of what we've done. So this is obviously the cover to the report. Go to the next slide. Essentially what we set out to do was to look at this from a number of different areas. And as many of you know, we've been doing a lot of national survey work, and we have been looking at parent preferences specifically for faith-based childcare. In the first survey, or the survey that we did back in December, we specifically found that 31% of parents with a single or two working parents who use childcare centers, over half of those parents preferred and used a program that was affiliated with a faith organization. And why did they do this? Well, what the results of our survey showed that they are looking at the issues around cognitive development as a top factor, obviously the social emotional learning of their children, and individual attention given to their children in these programs. One of the things we're going to talk about again is some of the other reasons that parents selected this, and talk is specifically about parents who were really interested in the values taught to their children in these programs. So next slide, who did we talk to? What have we done? We've engaged a broad spectrum of more than 25 national and state faith leaders in our conversations, childcare providers, and parents who use these programs to find out exactly what people are thinking about it. And this shows you just some of the people that we talked to, some of whom will be participating in our discussion today. And we want to thank them in particular for all the help they gave us. We, in the report, are making several recommendations. And if you go to the next slide, please. We're specifically think that one of the things that we don't know is just how much and what the share of the overall childcare market is coming from the faith community. And so we are recommending that HHS and Congress study this issue to find exactly how much of the childcare need is filled by the faith community. The next one is to look at technical assistance for states, because again, one of the things that we have found is that the faith community is not necessarily invited into a lot of the conversations at the state level. That can range from anything to being on state advisory councils to development of quality rating systems and a number of other things that we're going to talk about. So finally, we're making recommendations, and most recommendations do target the states in terms of how are they assessing the supply and demand of faith care in their communities, how are they recruiting people in, and how are they including them into the state advisory councils. Are they crosswalking? And we heard this from several people that crosswalking quality rating standards, the quality rating improvement standards, QRIS, could be an important part of bringing people into more formally into the system. And finally, looking at the CACFP regulations around food in particular, that we need to be sort of aware and respectful of cultural and religious food preferences in meal planning. So those were the big findings and big recommendations. We think that we should have a very candid conversation today about the role of faith in childcare and the impact that it has on families. So we will be thinking in terms of what we found in the report, but also, sorry about that, what specifically, what we can do to further the conversation nationally to get people engaged in the conversation at your local level. Before I turn it over to Suzanne, I want to thank the Alliance for Early Success and the Heinz Foundations for their support of our work on this. We're very appreciative of that and think that it will add enormously to the national conversation about childcare in our country. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne, who will introduce the panel and conduct the first series of the first part of the conversation. So Suzanne, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. I am really pleased to introduce our panelists today. They were an enormous assistance in helping build the report and helping us connect to local communities very directly in understanding the role of faith-based organizations in providing childcare. Lucreta Cobbs is the Senior Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs for Catholic Charities USA. Jason Kunzman is the Chief Program Officer of the Jewish Community Center, also known as the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And June Shalito is the Director of YATES Baptist Child Development Center in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you all for joining us today in the conversation. In order to give our audience a little bit more of an understanding around what faith-based childcare looks like, two of our panelists were really helpful in providing some video that gives us very visual insight. And I'm going to ask that we play the video now before we get started in the conversation so we have some level setting in understanding exactly what faith-based childcare looks like behind the scenes.
What is one thing you wish the public knew about faith-based childcare?
That it is not so much about religion, it's more about building relationships with children and other people.
Can we do our numbers this morning? Who can identify their numbers? What number do you guys see? 1, 2, 3.
Well, of course, we have a variety of families that use our program. We have single parent families, married couples, of course, everyone of different races and religions.
The Jewish Community Center of Greater Pittsburgh is home to a beautiful and secure early childhood development center. Our early childhood program is inspired by the Reggio Emilia approach, using universal values that we look at through a Jewish lens. In early childhood, children are agents of their own learning, building lifelong critical thinking skills. Children in our program are problem solvers, innovators, team players, upstanders, and are valued, engaged, and welcoming to everyone.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to get us started off with a quick question. I'm going to ask our panelists to give us an overview, quickly describe your program, including approximately the number of families and children that you serve, as well as, if you're able to, the number of teachers that you have, and just a little bit about your program. So I'll start off with Lucreta, if you could give us some information about your program.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I am with the National Office of the Catholic Charities Network. The Catholic Charities Network is comprised of 167 agencies that provide help and create hope for more than 13 million people each year. So much of our conversation will be based on our experiences on working with local agencies and the responses that we receive from them. Catholic Charities USA, the organization I work for, we do not provide services. What we provide is national representation and advocacy on behalf of Catholic Charities working on the front lines, providing services that include the typical things that we're known for, the soup kitchens, food and emergency service, housing, services to employment and training, as well as some of the services that include foster care, child care, aftercare services, summer camps, and education and enrichment services. Our agencies, they do not proselytize. We serve people because we are Catholic, not because they are. Our agencies serve all families regardless of their faith or their religion. Our agencies serve all families regardless of their faith or religion or no religion. And do not have and we do not promote a faith-based curriculum, but just there to meet the need and support of working families. It is important also, I think, to mention that not all of our Catholic Charities agencies provide childcare, and not all agencies provide the same services. We always have this thing that we say: when you see one Catholic Charities agency, you see one Catholic Charities agency, because each agency is truly unique in the community that it serves. For example, out of the 167 agencies that I mentioned, only 28 of those agencies provide child care services, and 30 of them provide Head Start services as well. And at one point, we served over 20,000 children in our program. I suspect we haven't taken numbers recently, but I suspect that it has changed in some way, especially as a result of the pandemic.
That's great, and we'll definitely want to talk about the impact of the pandemic with all of our panelists today. Jason, can you give us some perspective in terms of what your programs look like in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely, Suzanne, and thanks so much for having us. It really is a privilege to be with you and this esteemed group of experts this afternoon. The JCC of Greater Pittsburgh, we have 2 year-round facilities, one in the heart of the city, and one about 12 miles to the south of the city in a suburb called the South Hills. Both of the year-round facilities have early learning centers, and pre-COVID, we were serving nearly 310 children from approximately 260 families. And now, post or still in the throes of the pandemic, we find ourselves serving just under 200 children from about 170 families currently. In terms of educators, we're running at about 45 to 48 full-time educators, and a handful of part-time educators and floaters. And due to what I'm sure everyone else is experiencing in terms of staffing challenges, we do find ourselves on a daily basis relying on a small but mighty cadre of temporary help that comes in each day to assist in meeting ratios and assisting our children.
Mm-hmm. And June, tell us a little bit about YATES, please.
Yes, so good afternoon, and thank you for including us in this conversation. I run a relatively small program. We have a total of 64 children when we're full. Because of COVID, we currently only have about 45. We dropped actually down to only 11 last year when COVID first hit, because we could only serve essential workers at that time. So now we have 45. We take children from the age of 2 months through 5 in 5 classrooms, and we have approximately 20 staff. And I have to say that at the moment it's becoming increasingly difficult to find new staff. I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but I need 2 teachers and I can't find them. We are a 5-star facility, a high quality facility. We're also accredited by the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And we also have an eco-healthy certification, which means we do things that are green. We are a mission of the church here, and we've been open since 1966. The children that come here, some of their parents do want them to have a Christian-based education, but we also serve many families. They don't have to be of Christian faith to be able to come here.
So I want to talk about the families that your programs are serving for a moment. And I'm going to start with Jason. Our survey showed that during the pandemic, faith-based childcare did serve a significant portion of parents, at least for those that we spoke to. And I am wondering if you can talk about the families that the JCC serves, and specifically what the values are that attract the families that you serve, because we heard that again and again in our surveys, that it really came back to this element of values when it came to faith-based childcare.
Yeah, I think the survey results are spot on, Suzanne, certainly are in line with what our experience is here on the front lines. So typically about 10 to 15% of our families receive some type of financial assistance. We currently have about a 50-50 split of families who identify as Jewish and those who do not. Similar to my colleagues on the panel, again, we are open and accessible to anyone, regardless of the faith that they may identify with, or not, by the way. One of the things I'm really proud of is the fact that our early learning population is very representative of the geographies in which our two centers are located in terms of racial, ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic background and circumstances. When I think about what attracts families to the JCC, I truly believe that it is our paradigm of looking at the entire school day through a Jewish lens and including or incorporating Jewish values into everything that we do each day. I'm not talking about citing biblical text or memorizing important dates in Jewish history, but what I am talking about is basic principles that recognize the potential of every child, that elevate the profession of early childhood educators, the engagement of families and the broader community as full-fledged partners in the early childhood experience that we bring each and every day, and creating physical spaces that inspire inquiry and curiosity. We build our daily activities based on a set of principles which include valuing the educational journey as opposed to just the destination. We build personal relationships and value individuality. Opinions of children, of educators, of fellow community members from across the JCC are listened to and considered. We promote self-esteem and equality. We harness that community vibe, Suzanne, that you mentioned, and we actively engage in the world around us, not just in the classroom, not just in the broader early learning center, but again across the community at large. I find that those are really the things that really sort of resonate with our families.
Mm-hmm. And June, for your families, this aspect of values and the intersection with faith and community, talk to us about what your parents have shared with you about what attracted them to YATES, your program.
So I think for some of our families, the faith-based component is extremely important. So for example, we happen to be right close to a university that has a divinity school. So those parents, will often place their children with us. But equally, we have other families they came here because of the quality of the program they're looking for, or because they've been referred by other families. They know a family that has a child here or has had a child here, and they feel comfortable and they feel like they can trust us. So those things are important. And equally, it can be purely location. They drive past here or they live close, and that's what's important for them. And we also take children on subsidy. So part of the mission of this church, when they originally set up the program, was that they would help to provide for the community. So for lower income families that might not otherwise be able to afford high quality care, this was what they were trying to provide. And that's the reason why we do not charge what's called over and above the parent fee. So the parent fee is whatever DSS, asks them to pay, but we do not charge the difference between that and our regular rate. And that is the part of the scholarship program that the church wanted to provide. But in terms of values, I think that what parents come here for and what they hope that we're teaching is for children to learn to be responsible citizens. I guess that's what they're looking for. They want them to learn integrity and honesty and compassion and empathy and caring for one another. And that is what I think they come for. And so we do use the Bible to tell some what we call Bible truths. We're careful which stories we teach because there's some in the Bible that simply aren't appropriate for young children. So we're very careful which ones we use, but we use those stories to help children learn how to grow up happy, responsible, caring citizens.
Thank you. And Lucreta, you talked about your programs and that they really have a secular programming in the child care programs, but the mission of Catholic Charities is really the driver for all of the work, the programmatic work under the scope of the organization. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how the mission intersects with the work of your affiliates and how that feeds into the driver of serving specific populations.
So Catholic Charities agencies are driven by the mission to provide services to people in need. And there is a range of need in communities across the country, with childcare being one of them. Childcare is one of the services that some agencies in our network offer to the community that assists with the development of children. And it is one of the issues that is also on the radar of our social policy team, in which I am a part of. As you well know, childcare it is a necessity. It is a key support for working individuals and families, and for those engaged in educational and workforce programs. Without childcare, it's difficult to get an education, engage in workforce programs, and to meet the work requirements to receive federal benefits. So while the agencies we serve people from various income levels. Our programs primarily target people in low-income communities. Therefore, parents receiving childcare have access to services provided by that agency. So, and that could, range from, I named a number of services earlier, but, certainly, if reading literacy is offered by some agencies, financial literacy, budgeting, things of, that nature that can also help a family, in need. In addition, I believe parents are well served by having the peace of mind that they are bringing their child to a nurturing and caring entity that instill values that help build character regardless of their faith.
Great, thank you so much. And we do have a question from the audience that seems worth raising at this point in the conversation. If we are working with a common understanding or definition of faith-based childcare. And just for reference, we do have a definition within the report that BPC has published today. So for audiences that want to read the report, you can take a look at that. We have a very broad-based definition for faith-based childcare. But for our panelists that are working within this community and having many different types of programs serve under that banner of faith-based childcare, I'm wondering if any of you would like to respond and talk about what it means to be a faith-based childcare program and how that definition fits within the work that each of your programs is doing.
Yeah, I'll take a stab, Suzanne. Look, we're obviously a very much a faith-based organization. We are the Jewish Community Center. After all, we were founded in 1895 originally as a settlement house for immigrants that were coming to the United States and specifically to Pittsburgh, to the Pittsburgh area from primarily Eastern Europe. So our value base started right at the beginning, right at the founding of our organization. There is a text, do not stand idly by while your neighbor bleeds. And I think that has sort of always been at the core of what the JCC here in Pittsburgh, and quite honestly, the JCC movement in total has been about. Working and striving to identify evolving community need and then responding to those needs as they arise. And look, I firmly believe, and I'll get into this a little bit later, I hope I have an opportunity to do so, but a key component in being able to, for individuals and a community at large to have to pursue and engage in a high quality of life. I don't know how you don't include childcare as a key component of that, and the value set that we bring and deliver through our early learning environment. Again, it is not necessarily text, but it is context. So that's sort of the line that we have chosen to follow here at the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh. And I would just add that, we do celebrate, recognize all of the Jewish holidays that are scattered across the calendar each and every year. And one of my favorite moments each and every week is, although it has been somewhat COVID friendly and virtual, but every Friday morning at 10 o'clock, we gather our children in both locations to celebrate Shabbat. And when they come back on Monday, there's a slight recognition of the end of Shabbat, Havdalah. So again, we sprinkle it in, and it is much more of a context as opposed to strict text approach.
And so I think for our organization, I certainly would want to clarify that we are a faith-based service provider, and don't consider ourselves to be secular in nature. As I mentioned earlier, the work that we do, it is deeply rooted in Catholic social teaching, and so our basis for how we provide services is not necessarily because of a person's faith, is because we're Catholic. So the work that we do it because we're Catholic, and the values instilled in the children, it comes as a result of who we are as an organization. So certainly want to make that clear.
And Lucreta, we had talked when we were building the report about the financial structure of whether the church is able to support childcare programs and what some of the assumptions are around drawing from faith-based organizations in supporting social programming such as childcare. And I'm wondering if you can add a little bit more to that and help us understand what that looks like behind the scenes at Catholic Charities for childcare, which we know to be a low-income, low-revenue program service generally across the board, whether it's faith-based or not.
Right now, so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we get like all the money from donations from the church or from the parish, right? Which that is true. We do receive some funding, but only 18% of our overall funding comes from donations and contributions. And in some parishes, they do provide space for us to provide services, right? But a good percentage of our funding, about 40% of funding, and I'm talking overall, not just for childcare programs, right, comes from government funding. That's why it's important, and we always like to say, the work that we do it in partnership with government. We really can't do this work alone. Certainly, Catholic Charities agencies, they participate in childcare subsidies, so they receive childcare subsidies for the services provided, as well as participate in the child and adult food program that allows them to provide nutritious meals to children as well.
Wonderful. And Jason, I recognize that your programs recently instituted a policy to focus on teacher wages, which I can only assume during the pandemic and the impact that COVID has had on the childcare community was challenging to implement. Can you tell us more about this new policy, how leadership was able to make that decision, and what it really took for the JCC to prioritize your teachers?
Yeah, it's actually, one of those rays of sunshine, Suzanne, through the clouds of the pandemic, something that we're very proud of here at the JCC. So look, not unlike any other social service organization, the JCC here in Pittsburgh has faced its fair share of financial challenges over the last 14 months. We are very much a membership-based organization. 75% of our overall agency revenue was based on a combination of membership and in-person programming. Obviously, when you're not allowed to gather, all of that dries up literally overnight. Since we closed on March 15th of 2020, the temporary and mandated closure, we have lost 52% of our membership base. And as I indicated earlier, our current early childhood enrollment is only 65% of what it was pre-COVID. Again, not unlike any other early learning center across the country. As an organization, we transitioned from working with or from annual budgets to 60 to 90 day financial sprints, so that we could sort of pave some way through this current fiscal year and live to see another day for fiscal year 2022. And as we were doing that, it became very apparent relatively quickly how important early childhood would be to our rebuilding. And we've always prided ourselves on being well above the national benchmarks in terms of overall compensation, both in terms of salary, hourly wage, and fringe benefits. But as we began thinking about what the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh looks like in a post-COVID world, we realized that the national benchmarks in these areas were not moving nearly fast enough, and that if, in fact, early childhood was going to be an essential part of our recovery, we needed to do something on behalf of our early childhood staff and do it quickly. And it couldn't be tinkering around the edges anymore. So we dug deep, at a time where we were being open, and still to this day, every day we're open, we're losing money. But we dug deep and we adjusted our pay scale for full-time early childhood educators and increased it by nearly 14%. So not only did it sort of bring our average hourly rate to what we believe to be more in line with a living wage for our current staff, but it also set the stage for folks that hopefully we can begin recruiting to join us here at the JCC and get them immediately up at a level that we believe is more in line with a living wage. I'm happy to say that the increase was unanimously approved by our board of directors, but it doesn't come without its costs. We're projecting that this will result in an immediate impact of $275,000 to our bottom line, to the negative, by the way, increase in salaries and benefits. And unfortunately, due to some of the things that I'm sure we'll get into when we talk about, hopefully talk about policy recommendations, due to the fact that there's a lack of public funding and all sorts of other opportunities for families to draw upon, unfortunately, a lot of this is going to fall on the backs of our families. So we are projecting an across the board 5% increase for our tuition across all age groups next fiscal year. So that's where we are. But we're so pleased that we were able to do this, and really look forward to the benefits, not just as an organization, not just our educators, but the benefits that our children and our families will derive from the policy shift here.
And Jason, giving us the perfect segue, I'm going to turn it back to Linda for the final part of our discussion to talk about policy opportunities.
Yeah, and I just, it was interesting listening to the three of you talk about this, because as I think one of the things that struck me in listening to you and in the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years is, I think that there are two things. The first one is that for families, this values issue is very important, but a sense of community comes along with it. And I think that there's something to be said for that feeling that parents get in terms of that sense of community. And the fact that they also, one of the big standouts of the Head Start program is comprehensive services. And in sort of a different way, you all provide more comprehensive services to families than some standalone childcare programs can. I think that's a positive. I just wanted to put those two things out there. I am interested in, from each one of you, what is your involvement with your state or community in terms of policy? Are you asked to the table? Do you participate in the state advisory councils or any community discussions? And I guess starting, Jason, back with you, are you engaged in the state level policy conversations?
Yeah, so we follow closely with our local NACI organization, Trying Together, our advocacy group. We try and maintain our finger on the pulse of what's going on there. But I have to be honest, Linda, no, we have not been openly invited to the table. I don't take offense to that. I'm eager. And by the way, I would absolutely be the wrong person to invite to the table. I would encourage folks to reach out to, our respective directors of both of our early learning centers, and our educators as well. They're the ones that are on the front lines and are really seeing the day-to-day operations, and they'll know much better than I will. We did, however, leverage our National Association of JCCs to help us get in front of, here in Pennsylvania, we banded together with the JCCs across the Commonwealth, again, through our National Association, and are in somewhat regular, I think it's monthly conversations with DHS and the Office of Child Development and Early Learning. I don't necessarily think that the conversations have been particularly high level. I think, we tend to use those opportunities to complain a bit too much as opposed to blue sky and think about what the world of possibilities might be. So maybe I don't blame them for not inviting us to the table. But again, absent some pretty rigorous and weaseling and conniving a bit, we haven't really had what I'd call substantive opportunity to gather around the state level policy table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, June, let's hear from you on this one. Are you engaged in policy discussions in the state of North Carolina or in the Raleigh-Durham area?
So the program as a whole, I mean, I can't say the program's been invited. I do now serve on what's called the Durham Pre-K Governance Committee, which is a local initiative for pre-K children. And also they have an initiative here in Durham called ECAP, the Early Childhood Action Plan, and they're working on goals. So they've been working on this now for 2 years. And recently I served on a sort of committee to help create the goals for that. So other than that, we occasionally will receive shout outs from the North Carolina Early Childhood Coalition, who asks us, to lobby our stakeholders, our senators about various things that they're putting in place in the local government or in federal government. And, they'll send us information that says this is what we're working on. Please lobby your senator or your congressman or whatever to try and get the help that we need. But as a program as a whole, we haven't really been asked, but then we're relatively small and we're not Head Start or something like that. So I would say that in this local area, one of the organizations that has a lot to do with this is the local Childcare Services Association, which is the resource and referral agency, and they do a lot to try and promote what's best for early childhood education in the area.
And Lakrita, how about you in the Catholic Charities? What do you think has been your role in some of your organizations in state policies?
So, I would say it's a mixed bag. Some agencies are probably more involved and more included than others, but certainly, on the national level, I am the national representation. So certainly, I try to make our presence known, I'm in this space as well as, the other service areas that we operate in. What I will say is, I think it is important, to make your presence known, because I don't think, especially in the child care space, that faith-based providers are the first person that maybe they think of, and so I think it is important, to be in the front of your legislators, elected officials, and HHS, if you can, be a part, of any discussion and engage in meetings with them. I think that is important. I mean, you have to make your presence known.
Yeah. It's interesting. We have heard from parents across the board, that health and safety is their top priority when they're looking for childcare. And that makes absolute sense. I mean, these children are small, can't speak up for themselves, and so on. I think there's a perception out there that the faith-based programs don't necessarily comply with health and safety standards. And that's been one of the things that struck me about all of the work we've done on this, is that we have yet to hear a program that isn't very concerned about health and safety, doesn't take regulations seriously, isn't striving for higher quality. And I'd like you to comment on why you think there is a perception that faith programs somehow operate outside of these standards. Anybody want to start with me on that one? I think it's an important misperception that needs to be tackled in this country. Lakrita, let's start with you. I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, you're definitely put me on the spot. So let me see, and I not really given a whole lot of thought to that, but I think maybe some of the misconceptions it could be around stereotyping. Stereotyping and what people think about religion, right? And regardless what faith that you come from, there's probably a stereotype associated with maybe what the beliefs are, and maybe how folks within the faith conduct their business. So I would just say that I think a lot of a stereotyping, and certainly sometimes television doesn't do us that well, movies, things like that, it might not serve us as well, right? So I would say things probably along that lines. We're just not really giving a whole lot of thought to that.
Okay, June, how about you?
So I guess I can talk about things here in North Carolina. So if a program is open more than 4 hours a day, it's considered full-time. And if you're full-time, you have to follow the state licensing rules. You don't have a choice. We get visits from the licensing consultant twice a year. We get visits from sanitation twice a year. We have to do an annual fire inspection. We don't have a choice, because if we don't do those things, we get closed down. I do think that perhaps one of the reasons why people have this misperception is because there are a lot of half-day programs in this area, and I'm sure nationwide, and a lot of those are in churches. And if they're open less than 4 hours a day, officially, they don't have to follow the rules. However, in the programs that I've known, the majority of them they do what they call their voluntary compliance with whatever the state licensing rules are. So, I mean, I think maybe Lucretia's right. Maybe it's a misperception that has to do with, having heard something, but certainly faith-based programs are striving to be as safe and as healthy for children as any other program. I mean, it's very important to us, the care of the children is paramount.
Jason, before I let you answer that, put on the table, because we make the recommendation in our report about the QRIS systems, and sometimes we have found, parallel things going on where some programs in the faith community have a QRIS system, but are having a difficult time syncing that up with state QRIS systems. And I know that Pennsylvania has one. Layering that issue, the standards and the quality. Your thoughts on how do we bring these systems together, or what are the barriers to that? You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Look, I think in terms of the misperception question, and it is a misperception, I think people just need to come to a faith-based early learning center and see. I would suggest that our commitment as a sort of subset of the industry to a values-based approach ingrains an organizational discipline that more traditional non-faith-based early learning centers might not have, in terms of just being so intentional about everything that we do. Never mind the fact, as June said, that we are held to the same licensing standards and performance standards in order just to keep our doors open. In terms of the QRIS system, there's a lot to dig in there. And I would just throw out there for a future conversation, a future paper, whether or not the QRIS systems that we've got are actually really any indication of what quality in early learning actually is. I know that colleagues from across the Commonwealth have commented to me that the only reason why they participate in our QRIS program is not because they believe that adhering to the standards will actually lead to higher quality, but rather the financial bonuses that their educators stand to receive as they are, adherent to whatever the system is. That, to me, is not a true quality program. And I would, again, I'd love to challenge, and this is something, by the way, that faith-based early learning centers do every day, challenging the status quo, creating active and engaged citizens. Upstanders is what we refer to them here at the JCC. Challenge the status quo. It doesn't always have to be the way it is just because it is. I'd love to sort of engage in that conversation as to what quality really is. Is it ABCs and 1, 2, 3s? Or is it, when a child graduates from the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh's Early Learning Center, are they problem solvers? Do they know how to collaborate effectively with their colleagues? That's the type of stuff that will propel individuals as well as communities far into the future.
Mm-hmm. And June, you are quality rated to star 5, you said. So you probably have had a pretty good experience with quality rating, or how would you characterize that?
Yeah, so we're 5-star rated, and we're also accredited by the National Association for the Education of Young Children. I mean, I can't say that. So there's no real quality system that doesn't have some flaws. I guess you could say that, So certainly when we do the star rating, there are some things that we feel are not what we should be focusing on. That the social emotional health of the children is what we should be focusing on, and the evaluators, assessors will come in and they're looking to see how many blocks we have, and how many times we wash our hands, which is not that it's not important, but that doesn't seem to be what's most important to the care of children. And so that, yes, so there are flaws in any evaluation system, but they are what we have. And there are people who are working on improving those systems. There's now something called the class assessment system, which focuses much more on social emotional interactions between teachers and children, and how teachers are teaching, and whether they're getting through to the children. And those are the things that we really want to focus on. Not that the other things don't have some importance, but we feel like they're not what we should really be focusing on all the time.
That's an interesting thought. I think there is a big conversation going on, and Jason, to your point, I think that conversation does need to be had, about quality rating improvement systems and sort of what are we trying to do with them. We do have some audience questions here, and I do want to move to them because I think one of them is important. It kind of gets to what I was trying to suggest about the comprehensive services and the fact that you all your programs provide other supports. But the question is about how are your programs associated with other programs in the community? I mean, do you cooperate with home visiting? What's your relationship with the public schools and other family support agencies? And how do you make those connections? So let's start with you, back to you, June, on that one. And we'll start at the program level there.
Yeah, so in terms of collaborating with other agencies, yes, so we collaborate a lot with the local resource and referral agency. Because of COVID, we have to do it all via Zoom right now, but prior to that, we have often been signed up in various kinds of programs that they offer, and they will send TAs out for doing training and provide us with resources. So we do a lot with that. We also, when we have children that need referral or whatever, we collaborate first with the parents. We communicate with outside agencies in terms of, having therapists, and therapists we can still have come in. So, we have physical therapists, we have OTs, we have speech therapists, and these people all come in to work with children. And once they reach nearly the age of 3, then a lot of that is funded through the public school system. And so we gradually start moving towards those children moving into whatever public school they're going to go to. And we hope that by the time their children go there, we've formed a relationship with the public school, whatever school they're going to go to. Certainly in the kindergarten, the pre-kindergarten year, our hope has always been to contact the school. Unfortunately, we stopped doing field trips a number of years ago because of the difficulty with car seats. It's become a real issue. But we can call the public school system. We can have people, prior to COVID, we could maybe have a kindergarten teacher come in and talk to the children. We can have community people come in, like dental hygienists, doctors, community people that can come in and meet the children and tell them, this is what I do. So we do try to collaborate with the local community in various ways.
Lakrita, how would you answer that question? I think your agencies, they're obviously different state to state, but how do they collaborate?
Yeah, I think it's very much like what June said. I mean, again, like I said, not all Catholic Charities agencies provide services. Certainly, they take a holistic approach to addressing, the whole family, that comes to them for services. So certainly, not providing those services, you have to make those referral services as well. So there's a lot of collaboration, that would go on at the local level in order to make sure that you're addressing the whole person.
Jason, to you, there's a specific question in the chat about, you mentioned a 14% increase in pay. Can you give a little bit more about how that translates into hourly wages for the people in the impact on their paychecks?
Yeah. So we are now across all of our full-time educators at an average hourly rate of just about $15.25. And again, that's so you can do the math where we were 14% later, here we are. I would also add that prior to instituting this particular adjustment to our pay scale, we had also fully benefited all of our full-time educators. So that was something that had been done prior to, so paid time off, participation in 401k, all different types of insurance and whatnot. So again, the overall compensation package is what we've been looking at, and we feel as though we stack up pretty well looking across the industry and other centers here in the area.
Okay. And then before we move to closing here, there's one other one that I think is a pretty interesting question, and it asks, when and how do restrictions on religious instruction impact your ability to use public funds, whether it's childcare or other early education funds? Have any of you had any challenges? How do you work on that? Let's go back, Jason, to you.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any challenges here at the JCC, Linda, to be honest with you.
You basically take food program and do you participate in the subsidy system in all of them?
Absolutely.
Okay. And Lakrita, how about your organizations? Have they had any? Go ahead.
Sure. So as far as child care programs, as mentioned, we do participate in subsidy programs, child and adult food programs, and and of course across the agency we do receive government funding. So I don't think that's been a big problem. But what I guess what I would say is that we have some agencies that they don't take funding, and they don't take funding because sometimes it's too burdensome to take funding. The administrative costs sometimes is higher than what you're going to really actually get in return, and that's just pretty much overall I would say. And then also it was one agency when I asked them asked a question about that, they said the reason why they don't actually do or have a faith-based curriculum. Actually, it was a few agencies that responded, was because they provide the services through the state, and because they're providing that service, they're not allowed to have a faith-based component. And one of the recommendations, actually was, that they should be allowed to be able to have a faith-based component should they choose to do so. So,
That gets into an interesting conversation, and I'm looking at the clock and we have only 3 minutes left. So we'll have to take that up at another time. But the final question that I want to pose to you, if you could make one policy recommendation to either federal or state, what would it be? What do you think needs to change that would help you all do your work and be, better and more efficient at it? So let's start with June on this one.
So one thing is hard. There's actually two things we need.
Okay, that's good.
We need to pay our staff more money, and we can't do it because the parents are already paying what amounts to a mortgage payment for their child to come to childcare. And if you have more than one child, it becomes even more. Like we're talking about $2,500 a month for two children. A lot of people can't afford this. And so there needs to be some sort of way of us paying our staff a living wage. And by living wage, I'm talking about a minimum of $15 an hour. With some of our teachers are not making. I mean, I hate to say it, but we have a couple of teachers who've been here a long time, one of them nearly 16 years, and she's only making just above that. Now, we do offer benefits at this program, which is unusual. And we pay medical insurance for our staff, but still, we need to pay our staff a living wage, or nobody's going to enter this field. And then the other thing is I would like subsidy to cover middle-income families. So what happens is, we can serve low-income families and we can serve upper-income families, but the middle-income families, I've had families come to me and say, I've got one child with you, but I need to go part-time, or I'm going to have to pull out because now I've had another child and I can't afford childcare for two. So if we could raise the amount of money that they can be making and still be given some sort of subsidy help, we need help in those two areas, one for staff and the others for families.
Okay. Lakrita, how about you?
Okay, so I would just start with saying that we certainly concur with the bipartisan policy center recommendations, and I won't go through all those, but that is certainly something that we would that we support as well. Other recommendations in speaking with our agency, certainly the issue of being able to pay a just and fair wage to those on the front lines providing the services, we think is very important. We believe that there's a need for stable and adequate funding for child care subsidy programs so that all families, especially the working poor, can have access to quality and affordable child care. We believe that there should be funding. We need additional funding. Funding is like one of the number one things that folks always ask for. I don't care what question you ask them, it usually always comes around to funding, but funding to assist child care providers with developing programs to ensure families have access to high quality child care, and also an investment in programs such as universal pre-K, early Head Start, and Head Start programs, and that need to adjust that subsidy so it keeps up with the costs of providing services. And I probably could go on all day because we have a whole agenda around this, but I think that those are some I would like to highlight.
Okay, we might be able to, if you have some things that you'd like for us to highlight down the road, please share them with us. We will. And Jason, you're going to get the last word here.
Thank you. Look, I'll just build off of what my esteemed colleagues have said. Once we figure out what quality is, and once we can pay folks enough, I think we need to go a little bit further back down the chain and sort of reimagine what workforce development looks like in the profession of early childhood education. We want to make sure that those that are coming out of school and entering into the pipeline of future recruits know best practices and can hit the ground running. We often find ourselves having to play catch up and bring our staff up to speed on our paradigm and what we believe is best practice in engaging and engaging with the children. So it would be great if there was a workforce development initiative that really prepared the workforce for the evolving needs of the children and the communities in which they reside.
Great way to end this conversation. I want to thank the panel very much for hanging in there with us, participating in this, and for your feedback and willingness to work on the report with us. We've learned a lot along the way. I think the takeaway for me is we've got to get the faith community engaged in the policy conversations at all levels of government. And we should, you need to be invited in. I think you've got a lot of lessons to share with people, and that we need to, I guess, be myth busters, you guys, in terms of the myths that surround the faith issue in this country, and get on with it because our kids need it and our families want it. So with that, I want to especially thank Suzanne, who worked tirelessly on this report. And again, hope everyone will take a look at the report and give us some feedback. Hopefully it is a first step in opening this dialogue between the faith community and our early childhood efforts. So thank you all, and everyone have a great day.